if you watched every single episode from Xiaolin Showdown from beginning to end, not a single character when it comes to the main protagonists ever fall in love with a soul and gore. Granted, you could make the shipping between Mumundo and Kimiko work, but at the same time, they never got together, and they never did in Xiaolin Chronicles. But with this episode, it goes to show that they never capitalized the romance of a male character pairing up with a female character completely, because as far as I'm concerned, this show has a lot of limitations the more I think about it. After defeating Jack Spicer in the Xiaolin Showdown, the main characters encountered Dyrus. All the while they encountered Clothane. These two were in the Arctic for a very long time, to the point that Clothane was chasing after Dyrus the entire time. So the Shaolin monks took Dyrus to the Shaolin temple to protect her. Dyrus manipulates Kimiko so that she can seduce the other characters in order to do the work, in order to further her plan. Because if you watch midway through this episode, it's revealed that Clothane is the protagonist while Dyrus is the antagonist. In all honesty, upon watching this episode for the first time, it's always easy for characters like Omi, Rumudo, and Clay to be easily seduced. Because if I remember correctly, if there was ever an episode where one of the characters, including Kimiko, ever have a crush towards that someone, I'm going to assume that it will probably lead to a corner for the writers. Every time I watch every single episode of this show, it really feels difficult to have one of the characters ship with someone, even if it's mostly outside of the Shaolin Temple. When they encountered Dyrus, it's no surprise that everyone except Kimiko has an immediate crush towards her. Because as far as I'm concerned, whenever I think about this episode back then, it's just mostly of people's reactions of what they feel towards a girl. But watching this episode now, it really shows that there was an actual reason onto why none of the characters are close to each other, mainly when it comes to romantic relationships. And that includes Rumundo and Kimiko. And considering that Clothane only appears in this episode, same way as Dyrus, I'm going to assume that they didn't know what to do when it comes to figuring out to fill in the episodes in Season 2, since that Season 2 has 26 episodes, while Seasons 1 and 3 have 13 episodes. This is literally the best that they could come up with. And considering that the last episode centered around cowboys, it goes to show that anything is somewhat possible in this show, but done for the right reasons, unlike Xiaolin Chronicles. But if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, Clothane in this episode is really entertaining. Regardless if he only appears in this episode only, I have to admit that his motivations of stopping Dyrus really makes sense, because as far as I'm concerned, if you really think that Dyrus is beautiful, then you haven't even seen her true form once she steps out of the water. In all honesty, it would probably have been a lot more hilarious if Dyrus encountered more male characters who are desperately wanting her attention, but then when she gets out of the water, she turns into that. All the male characters would be scarred. I'm gonna be perfectly real with you, that would probably be a really hilarious joke if they ever capitalized it, but considering the focusing on the plot a lot more, it's not really a big loss, but honestly, it would have been a hilarious sequence. Then again, Dyrus will probably been Katanabe 2.0 the more I think about it, knowing how she seduced Omi later on in this season. I guess it goes to show that having a female character as a love interest just isn't Xiaolin Showdown's thing at all. The Xiaolin Showdown itself is mostly a downer. I'm mostly aware that this show is going to have downer Xiaolin Showdowns, similar to to the final Omi episode where the Xiaolin Showdown was mostly Saga. The Xiaolin Showdown itself is mainly getting the Shingon Wu from the opponent. That's literally it. I mean, granted, I understand that Daiwis is a different opponent compared to the opponents that the main characters have encountered throughout the show, but at the same time, this Xiaolin Showdown wasn't entertaining. In fact, the Xiaolin Showdown from the beginning, while Jack, Spicer, and Nomi are climbing the ice mountain to get the Wu, is a lot more entertaining. Then again, if you're fully aware that you have downloads when it comes to Xiaolin Showdowns, I don't blame you if you didn't enjoy the Xiaolin Showdown between Omi and Daiwis. If I'm going to be honest, if Clothane actually returns in the future, he will probably do something interesting. But when it comes to Daiwis, like I said earlier that she is somewhat closer to being Katanabe 2.0, I think there was a reason onto why the other villains had a chance to return, since that their motivations are somewhat unique, even if they're mostly what villains do throughout this show. Because as far as I'm concerned, Daiwis' motivations is just mainly taking over the world, which is the same thing as the other villains, but considering her own vision of taking over the world is a lot more personal between the other characters, mainly the antagonists. I don't even think it would be that interesting, because as far as I'm concerned, all the villains are mostly a mixed bag when it comes to my point of view, but when it comes to Daiwis, she is really low on my list. This episode is what it is, and it's also an indication onto why the characters never go together, never come together in a romantic relationship at all. I mean, granted, it could be a possibility if they had other drafts centering around it, but considering after watching all the episodes from Xiaolin Showdown, I'm going to assume they need to do what's best for the characters. Though then again, shipping characters like these isn't something I would usually enjoy of. Like, there are other shows that I do enjoy shipping the characters, but when it comes to Xiaolin Showdown, it's not literally something I will enjoy. Because as far as I'm concerned, these characters may be goofy at times, sometimes take the roles seriously. And whenever they take the roles seriously, it's most likely the fact that I focus on their character traits. I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10.